Welcome everybody to another video of Ancient Greece Reloaded. Today we will talk about the famous Philoctetes, a Greek hero famed as an archer and a participant in the Trojan War. By the way, if you like the video, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel so as to stay tuned for upcoming videos. Philoctetes is the name given to a hero in Greek mythology, a Greek hero who was a suitor of Helen, a fighter at Troy, and one of those Achaean heroes who hid within the wooden horse. In antiquity though, Philoctetes was far more famous than he is today. Philoctetes was the son of Poias and his wife, the Monassa or Methone. Poias was king of Melivoia in Thessaly, but he's more famous as a hero than a king, for Poias was often named as one of the heroes who sailed on the Argo with Jason. Philoctetes himself comes to prominence with the death of another Greek hero, the greatest of all Greek heroes, Heracles. The common story tells of Heracles dying after being infected with the poisonous blood of the Lernea Hydra, while wearing the robe presented to him by his wife Deianira. This robe was the shirt of Nessus, which was coated in the blood of the dead centaur, whom Heracles had previously killed. Heracles recognized that he was dying, for nothing could be done to cure him of the blood of the Hydra, and so, in Mount Iti, Heracles constructed his own funeral pyre, but no one would light the pyre for him. Heracles called upon all those who passed by the pyre to light it, but everyone refused until Philoctetes passed by. Philoctetes did not expect payment for helping out Heracles, but in gratitude, Heracles gave Philoctetes his famous bow and arrows. This act of Philoctetes allowed for the apotheosis of Heracles, and Heracles was thus transported to Mount Olympus. Other versions of the myth tell of the funeral pyre being lit by Poias, an old comrade of Heracles, for both had been Argonauts, and it was from his father that Philoctetes inherited the bow and arrows of Heracles. Alternatively, Philoctetes was not a passerby, but was already a companion of Heracles and his armor-bearer, who had been with the hero when he was poisoned. Poias had been a fine archer, indeed the finest amongst the Argonauts, and he would pass on his knowledge and skills to Philoctetes. But Philoctetes' skills would far surpass that of his father, and by the time he was of age, Philoctetes was known as amongst the top archers of the ancient world. It was therefore only natural that when news came that Helen, the stepdaughter of King Tyndareus of Sparta, was accepting marriage proposals, Philoctetes set out for Sparta, and there Philoctetes would become one of the suitors of Helen. In Sparta, Philoctetes would also be one of the heroes who took the oath of Tyndareus, prior to the new husband of Helen being chosen. The oath was designed to prevent bloodshed amongst the suitors, but it also made those who saw the oath honor bound to protect the man chosen. Philoctetes was ultimately unsuccessful in winning the hand of Helen, for Menelaus was chosen. Later, of course, Helen was abducted and all those who had taken the oath of Tyndareus were called to arms to retrieve her from Troy. Thus, when the fleet gathered at Aulis, Philoctetes was in charge of 7 ships, combining troops from Melivoia, Methone, Olison and Thaumakia, and Philoctetes was named as one of the Achaean leaders. When the ships of Philoctetes arrived at Troy though, they were no longer under his control, for Methone, the half-brother of Ajax the Lesser, was now in command, and Philoctetes was no longer with the Achaean force, for he had been left behind upon Lemnos, or Chrysi, or Tenedos. The reason for the abandoning of Philoctetes was due to the fact that the Greek hero was suffering from a festering wound caused by a snake bite, a wound that caused Philoctetes great pain and emitted a gut-wrenching odor. One version of the story tells of Philoctetes being bit by a snake at the altar of Athena upon the island of Crete. Alternatively, Philoctetes was bitten by a snake sent by Apollo, when King Tenes of Tenedos, a son of Apollo, was killed by the Achaeans when traveling towards Troy. More commonly, the snake bite was said to have occurred on Lemnos, when the goddess Hera sent a snake to bite Philoctetes, Hera being angry with Philoctetes for the help given to her nemesis, Heracles, when he was dying years before. No matter what the cause of the snake bite, Odysseus persuaded Agamemnon and Menelaus that Philoctetes should be left behind, for there was little doubt that the hero would die from his wound. Philoctetes of course did not die, and although in pain, he was able to acquire food to eat through his skill with the bow, and some tell of how Evnios, king of Lemnos and son of Jason, aided the Greek hero. In the 10th year of the Trojan War, Helenos, the Trojan seer, revealed to the Achaeans that Troy would not fall unless the bow and arrows of Heracles were used in the fight. These were of course the weapons of Philoctetes, who was left behind in Lemnos. A small force was dispatched by Agamemnon to bring the weapons to Troy, and this force was normally said to have been led by Odysseus and Diomedes, although Neoptolemus is also often said to have been present as well. The Achaeans who arrived on Lemnos expected to simply take the bow and arrows of Heracles from where they lay, next to the body of Philoctetes, but of course Philoctetes was not dead, and now they were faced with trying to convince a man they had abandoned to help them. Some tell of Odysseus actually tricking the weapons out of the hands of Philoctetes, but it was also said that Diomedes refused to take the weapons and leave the man behind. Diomedes might have been able to convince Philoctetes to return with him to Troy, but it was also said that it was only when Heracles, now a god, appeared that Philoctetes agreed to go to Troy. Salvation for Philoctetes was at hand upon Troy, for the sons of Asclepius, Methone and Podalirius, were present in the Achaean camp. Methone and Podalirius had many of the skills of their father, and they would cure the hero of his wound, though this does beg the question of why the wound was not originally healed upon Lemnos. A less told version of the Philoctetes myth has the Greek hero cured of his wound before the return of Diomedes and Odysseus, for Peleus, a son of Hephaestus, and the priests of Hephaestus upon Lemnos had healed Philoctetes. In this version of the tale, Philoctetes and Evnios had already undertaken much fighting, conquering islands near to Lemnos that had been settled by Carians. Philoctetes would get to fight at Troy as well, and amongst those that Philoctetes killed, with his arrows included Acamas, Dionephs, Pyrrhasus, and Methone, although these names are not universally amongst the surviving sources. Nevertheless, Philoctetes was responsible for killing one important Trojan hero, for it was Philoctetes who killed the Trojan prince Paris. In some versions of the death of Paris, it was said that an arrow of Philoctetes went through his right eye, but others tell of how a poisoned arrow simply wounded the Trojan, but Paris subsequently died when Oenone refused to heal him. Obviously, the death of Paris did not end the Trojan War, and whilst Philoctetes and Neoptolemus were of the opinion to continue the war through battle, other Achaean heroes who had fought for 10 years were looking to find a stratagem to gain victory. Thus, the wooden horse was built, and when it was wheeled into Troy by the unknowing Trojans, Philoctetes was present in its hollow belly. Philoctetes was therefore present during the sacking of Troy, although he was not blamed for any of the sacrilege that took part during the fall of Troy. Despite being guiltless, Philoctetes struggled to return home, but eventually the Greek hero did return to his kingdom. But like so many other Greek leaders, he found out that he was no longer welcomed in his own homeland. Rather than attempting to retake his kingdom though, Philoctetes travelled onwards, settling in the area known as Magna Graecia, on the Italian peninsula, where he was said to have found the cities of Macala, Petelia and Crimisa. In Crimisa, Philoctetes was said to have constructed a temple to Apollo, where he would lay down his famous bow and arrows. In antiquity, the death of Philoctetes was never recorded, but in the 12th century AD, the Byzantine poet John Zezes told of the hero's demise as he fought alongside Rhodian colonists in a local war. Let us finish with the following saying: "The just man is most free from disturbance, while the unjust is full of the utmost disturbance." Epicurus. That being said, remember guys to hit the like button and to subscribe to our channel, it would help us a lot. Thanks for watching and stay tuned for upcoming videos.